Good morning, fifth graders. So today we're going to be looking at lesson 8. So we're looking at adding and subtracting mixed numbers and whole numbers. So there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. So I'll show you a couple of different methods that we can use. So let's take a look at A. So if you notice, all of our questions on the on the left side of your page are all addition and the right side are all subtraction. So A, C, E, G are adding, and B, D, F, and H are subtracting. So let's take a look at A. So we have 2 plus 1 and 1/5. So one of your options, and this is mostly with adding, it's a little bit trickier with subtracting. But sometimes with adding our mixed numbers and our whole numbers or adding fractions like this, we don't need to do anything with them. We can almost think of this as being like, 2 plus 1 plus 1/5. So that's an option that we have when it comes to adding. We can kind of break each of these up into different pieces. So if we have 2 plus 1 plus 1/5, we end up with 3 and 1/5, right? We add our two whole numbers together and then add our fraction on to the end. So we're going to stay with adding and then we'll go to subtracting after. So next we have, for C, we have 5 and 2/5 plus 2 and 3/5. So another option that we have, obviously we can use that same method from A, but another option that we have is to turn these into improper fractions. So we can do this by thinking of, or if we think of 5 over 5 or 5/5 as being 1, then that means that 5 would give us 25/5 plus 2/5, which would give us 27/5. And then again, we have our 2, which if we think of 1 as being 5/5, 2 is going to give us 10/5 plus 3/5, which will give us 13/5. And then we can add those together. We end up having 40/5, which is equal to 8. So sometimes this one is going to be a little bit more work, but this is a strategy that we can use for subtracting as well. So I'll show you that one too when we get to subtracting. Another option that we have is to use a number line. So I'm going to draw a number line. And since I have 9 and 3/4 as my starting number, I'm just going to start with 9. Oops, I need to make my number line bigger. Let me try this again. Sorry about that, y'all. I made my number line a little bit too small. So if I'm starting at 9 and 3/4, that means that I'm going to be about here. So then I'm going to jump 8 spaces. So I'm going to jump 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's going to put me at 17 and 3/4. So those are a couple of different ways that we can add our fractions. So I want you to take a minute and solve G on your own. You can use any method that you like. You can use just the adding, you can use a number line, you can use turning them into improper fractions. Completely up to you. Take a minute and solve that, and then you can pop back in to check your answer. Alrighty, so I'm going to solve this using that first method that I showed you. So I'm going to break this into 15 plus 17 plus 2/3. Then I'm going to add my 15 and my 17 together. And I get 32 and 2/3. So those are 3 different methods that we have for adding these numbers together. Let's take a look now at subtracting. So we have some options here for subtracting as well. So first I'm going to show you the number line. So again, we're going to draw a number line. So it doesn't need to be a lot of numbers since we have some small numbers here. So we're starting at 2 and we're subtracting 1 3/8. So we're going back 1 3/8 spaces. So we're going to go back 1 space to 1. Then for our 3/8, we're going to have to kind of make some 8s in between 0 and 1. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the big spot is our 8. So then we're going to go back 3/8, so 3 little spaces. So 1, 2, 3. So that spot is going to be our 5/8. So 2 minus 1 3/8 is equal to 5/8. Another option that we have is to kind of turn these into the improper fractions. So we have 4 minus 2 2/7. So again, if we think of 7/7 as being 1, that means that 4 is going to be 28/7. Minus, we have 2, which is going to equal 14/7. And then we can subtract the 2/7. So we can almost think of this as being 28 minus 14 minus 2 all over 7. And we end up with 12/7. So like we talked about before, we want to turn these into mixed numbers where it's possible. We talked about this a little bit yesterday and a little bit before break. So we have to think about this as, or one way we can think about this is that we have 7/7. And then we have, after that, we have 7, and then 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 extra 7s. So we have our 5, right? So 5 more 7s gives us our 12. So 12/7 is going to be equal to 1 5/7. So 4 minus 2 2/7 is equal to 1 5/7. I want you to take a minute and solve F and H. You can use either one of those methods, or if there's another method that you prefer to use, then you're welcome to do that as well. And then you can pop back in and check your answer. Alrighty, so I'm going to solve these both with a number line, but I'm going to modify it a little bit. So I'm going to have my number line. And I know that 17 minus 15 is going to give us somewhere around 2. So I'm going to start my number line with 1 and then 2. But then I am going to I'm going to put this little like symbol here. So that means like my number line is like squished up right there, so I don't have to draw it as big. And I have 17. So I know that when I subtract 15, I'm going to jump all the way back to 2. And then I have my 2/3 that I need to take away. So then I'm going to jump back 1/3 and 2/3. And I end up at 1 and 1/3. So 17 minus 15 and 2/3 is going to be equal to 1, not 2/3, 1 and 1/3. And I can do kind of the same thing for H as well. I can use that same kind of squished up number line. I know that 100 minus 20 is going to give me somewhere around 80. So I'm going to go 79 and then 80 and then my squiggle and then 100. So when I subtract 20, I'm going to go back to 80 and then I have my eighths. So I need to go back 7 eighths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I end at 79 and 1/8. Alrighty, so we have a couple of different methods here for solving these. So let's take a look. We have 2 word problems here. So I want you to pause and solve try working out these word problems using whichever method you prefer. And then you can pop back in if you get stuck or to check your answer. Alrighty, so number 2 says Calvin had 30 minutes in timeout. For the first 23 and 1/3 minutes, Calvin counted spots on the ceiling. For the rest of the time, he made faces at his stuffed tiger. How long did Calvin spend making faces at his tiger? So we're going to subtract here. So I'm going to draw my number line. If you chose to do this with a different method, that's totally fine. I'm going to show it with a number line. So I know that I need to end somewhere around 30. And I know that if I subtract 30 minus 23, so that's about 23 and 1/3. If I subtract 30 minus 23, it's going to put me somewhere around 7. So I'm going to go 6 and then 7. And then I have my squiggle to show that my number line is squished. And then I'm going to subtract my 23, which brings me to 7. I'm going to put in my thirds. And I take away 1/3. So that puts me here. That puts me at 6 and 2/3. So that means for the last 6 and 2/3 minutes, Calvin stared at his stuffed tiger. Number 3 says that Linda planned to spend 9 hours practicing the piano this week. By Tuesday, she had spent 2 1/2 hours practicing. How much longer does she need to practice in order to reach her goal? So I'm going to do this. It's a little bit different. It's not exactly a way that I showed you before, but we're going to try it. So we have 9 hours minus 2 1/2 hours. So I'm going to kind of adapt one of our addition strategies. So I'm going to think of this as being 9 minus 2 minus 1/2. So I know that 9 minus 2 gives me 7. So now I have 7 minus 1/2. Well, if I have 7 and I take away half, I end up with 6 1/2 hours. So what we did there was we took our 2 numbers, our 9 and then our 2 1/2, and we broke that up into 9 and 2 1/2, and then subtracted each of those. So we're subtracting 9 minus 2 and then 7, that gave us 7, and we subtracted 1/2 and we got 6 1/2 hours. We can check all of these by adding them back together. So that is lesson 8. So super quick, let's take a look at your independent practice. You have 4 just kind of regular adding and subtracting problems. You can choose however you want to solve them. you can use one of the methods that we talked about, or if you have another method that you know, you can use that as well. Just make sure that you show your work. And it would be extremely helpful for me when I'm taking a look at your work if you either draw a box around your answer or try to write your answer up next to the original equation, just so I can see where your answer is. Because sometimes, especially if we have number lines and things like that, right? If we look back at this, it can get a little bit confusing where our answer is. So it's super helpful if we get in the habit of boxing our answer or writing it next to the original equation. And then you also have a word problem. Total length of 2 ribbons is 13 meters. If one ribbon is 7 5/8 meters long, what is the length of the other ribbon? So you can solve these however you want to, whatever works best for you. Just make sure that you show your work. If you have any questions or run into any problems, please let me know or let Miss Sally know. We're both here and we're happy to help. Alrighty, 5th graders, I will see you all tomorrow. Have a fantastic